Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you that are joining the AI Revenue Summit. Thank you for your time today. My name is Kevan Savage. I'm one of your speakers for the event. I'm joining you from Alexander Group. We are a revenue growth consulting firm. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I hope you find this session valuable. We're going to share some recent research we've been running in the marketplace, along with some insights and trends on use cases for AI and revenue growth with all of you today. So as I mentioned, Alexander Group, we're a revenue growth consulting firm. We specifically focus on go-to-market transformation across marketing, sales, and services organizations. As I briefly referenced as well, I run our marketing practice. So that's all things marketing, digital, product related. And AI is at the epicenter of what we do in the marketing practice at Alexander Group. And so we work across many different industries in large organizations, mid-sized, smaller organizations that are scaling up, scaling out. That could be business services, manufacturing, tech, you name it. And so one of the things we wanted to share with all of you today, as you think through advancing your AI for revenue growth strategy, is one, some recent research that we've shared, and coming out of that research, some use cases for those growth plays themselves. So let me give you the backdrop. We just wrapped up some recent research around specifically AI, and we'll break that down into more detail here in just a moment here. We went out and surveyed a number of different executives across multiple industries, and these are executives that are what you might call your resident AI experts, right? In larger B2B organizations. They are tasked with developing the strategy and the deployment and the measurement of AI in their organization. So we went out and ran a series of different interviews and kind of quantitative survey data collection points and things along those lines. And what we were trying to understand was, how are you accelerating AI in your commercial organization? And what are those key activities that you're leveraging or deploying to do that? And so what you see here is 4 different functional areas. We asked questions about, how are you applying AI in a marketing capacity, sales capacity, service capacity? If you have a revenue ops organization, how are they thinking through advancing AI in terms of their maturity and their deployment? For today's session, though, we're going to focus on marketing. And the reason for that is when we went out and we surveyed these executives, hands down, a number of them said, like, look, our marketing team is kind of tip of the spear on drafting and defining that strategy, but also orchestrating the execution of that strategy to and through the go-to-market commercial organization. So what we tend to hear from the marketing participants here is, look, we're advancing AI for lead gen or content generation or channel and mix optimization, things along those lines. But different functions have different methods and applications. We're going to go into that in terms of, what others are kind of seeing and how they're applying that across these different functions. But for today's session, in terms of the growth plays, we're going to predominantly focus in marketing and how they're using that to kind of orchestrate that across these teams. So what we do know from the research is that generative AI is kind of spanning the expansion of the scope of artificial intelligence in organizations. And what we mean by that is, if you're a manufacturer and you're in industrials, automation is kind of paramount to what you're doing relative to machine learning. And as you connect those two things together through AI, you're able to use different kind of methods and data points to connect these neural networks to actually use different methods to deliver value for not only AI on the whole, but also as you think through the measurement of different kind of growth activities relative to your organization. So we call this the human process augmentation stack. And what we did was, on the right, is we surveyed, the types of AI-enabled tools that, others were using in their organizations as part of this research, to think through, like, where are the areas that we can really kind of understand acceleration for growth plays where AI may or may not fit, right? So we saw heavy utilization around forecasting, lead scoring and qualification. I know that one's probably very interesting to a number of folks. Pricing, sentiment analysis, both at a customer level, a customer experience level, but also at a brand level. And then in the marketing space, a lot around content generation, kind of AI chatbots, virtual sales assistants, to really move customers kind of through the kind of, find, decide, buy decision stages and processes. And so when we broke that down even further, marketing was leading the way in terms of both AI investments in participation and implementation. And so, one of the questions we asked was, like, great, you've got a bunch of tools, which we all are having a ton of fun with, but are you getting the right participation in your organization? Are you getting the right implementation by your functional area? And what we saw was on the participation side, marketing was making more kind of planned investment in their budget this year, fiscal year, if you will. And then they were also driving more of the implementation or in the process of implementing, a lot of the AI activities and strategies, versus, sales, service, and RevOps, things like that. And it doesn't really matter if it's marketing, sales, service, or RevOps. What matters here is that you're thinking about the balance of investment relative to tracking your adoption and implementation of that investment. We hear from CFOs all the time, look, we're putting investment there. We're still not clear. And yes, all of you are on LinkedIn reading the news that, and investing in the stock market where, there are challenges around AI investment. And so what we're hoping to do in the back half of today's presentation is share with you some of the growth plays that those have kind of really focused on to show the connection between where they're investing in AI, where they're executing in AI, but more specifically, where they're using that to tie to growth and commercial objectives with a line of sight to measurement and performance for somebody like the CFO. So also from the research, questions around, how are they thinking through aligning their AI tools relative to growth goals? And we're going to kind of go into this in more detail as well in terms of different growth goals. But when we talk about awareness and engagement, this is what the executives came back with, right? In terms of, hey, here's the types of tools we're using to, orchestrate strategies against things like awareness or engagement. So Azure Translator or 6sense and Human Linker or Adobe Firefly, things along those lines. So you'll have these materials at your, at your pleasure and leisure to go through in more detail. So I won't spend too much time on it today as part of this session. But the point was lots of questions out there around what tools should I use? What are the best tools? And the analogy I always give executives is like, hey, rewind 10 to 12, maybe 15 years ago to when marketing automation was all the buzz, right? And at that time, there was lots of executives and leaders saying like, look, we're going to invest in that. But at that time, there were what, 5, maybe 10 options for you to choose from. And if you look at that today and you said like, hey, we need to invest in marketing automation, there's probably something like 5,000 instances of, a platform or a tool that has, some type of application that's marketing automation related. So the point there is the AI tool ecosystem is already so fragmented, so pervasive that finding those critical core tools that you need to select and align to your growth goals is going to be mission critical for your organization. There's no shortage of tools out there, but one of the biggest challenges we see already is that organizations struggle to actually pull through the connectivity of these tools relative to their growth goals. So do think about that as part of your strategy. So let's jump into some growth plays. So one of the things we've done as going back to our research here, and this is, by the way, this is ongoing research that Alexander Group will continue to run all through the remainder of this year, all into next year, just based on our clients and our executives asking for, hey, we need a good pulse on how AI is evolving. We will continue to do research around what we call these growth plays. And so what I'm sharing with you today are those that are kind of called out here in these 2 boxes around developing qualified pipeline and cross-selling and upselling. But there are more to come as part of this research. So as an example, we have growth plays around improving demand gen or around how do you think through, re-envisioning your commerce strategy and getting better scale out of it, leveraging AI. So for today, these 2 growth plays, but, connect with Alexander Group, connect with myself. Happy to share ongoing research as things evolve here in this space, as it's evolving quite actively. But let's jump in. So one of the questions we asked around awareness and engagement around AI and developing qualified pipeline is, hey, what are some of your best practices and how are you enabling those best practices with artificial intelligence? And the way we've bucketed this is, look, there's a category or set of practices around data capture and analysis. There's a category around strategy development, execution, and then there's a category around, call it customer or content interaction and generation. So, customer facing assets that you want to be consumed and or you're targeting. And so we asked executives like, hey, what are some of those, best practices? So you can see some of those on the screen here today, but I guess more specifically, we also asked, how are you enabling that? Are you leveraging machine learning? Are you leveraging generative AI or a combination of those tools? And so you can see kind of some examples here of what executives have shared in terms of how they're leveraging both machine learning and generative AI alongside some of the best practices. What I want to walk you through is an actual client use case around how they're developing qualified pipeline in terms of best practices internally, but also different tools that they're using. So let's jump into that now. So this is a technology solutions provider client of ours. And essentially, they had this hypothesis that, look, we do our market research all year long, typically biannually, where we go out and understand our total addressable market, our TAM SOM, if you will, where we have our right to win, all those things. But what we don't have is a good pulse on what is the actual true market sentiment. And so what they were, struggling with was they had a ton of different data capture points, as I would call them, right? They had call transcripts, they had emails, they had all kinds of web and behavioral analytics, they had social media tools, they had, news articles and some other competitive intel tools. What they wanted to do was actually bring that together and start thinking through how do they bring that unstructured, uncaptured data around prospects and current customers and really get a good pulse on what the market is actually seeing relative to their market sizing activities. So what they did was they used a couple tools here, in this case, Chattermail and Context of News Intel, to actually scan a lot of these different data sources and bring that together through a machine learning model to actually develop out a social sentiment AI analysis that they could point to a market at any given point in time to learn about both potential market opportunities, meaning what is the market saying that we're not addressing versus what is the market saying that we are addressing that's not converting at the rate we should expect, to start informing very, very agile approaches to market entry strategies. So that's the left side of the slide here, which was how do we get better prospect data to understand intent and also kind of customer insights that they were blind to just due to data and tool fragmentation historically. What they were looking to then do on the right side was to build flexibility, that agility I mentioned, and actually start rethinking through the attribution models that they had in place. So how do they train what they've put in the market in terms of market coverage? How do they understand new market entry strategy and potential in terms of what the market is saying versus what they're reaching and what they're converting? And so they can start pivoting both the investment and the performance expectations of developing qualified pipeline for their organization. So sharing this as an example with you all, where we would call this a leading edge practice, where many companies have this similar challenge, but they haven't brought it together to rethink their market research and sentiment strategy to drive their go-to-market targeting and activation. So use this as a backdrop to rethink, how you might develop your qualified pipeline in a different way in the future as well. So that's developing qualified pipeline. And again, lots of examples around this from current clients as well. So ping me with questions you might have as follow-up from the AI Revenue Summit. Happy to share other examples with you as it relates to developing qualified pipeline where appropriate. Next up, cross-selling and upselling. By the way, one of the common pain points for organizations where marketing may be focused more on new logo acquisition, sales is focused on kind of expansion opportunity, managing existing accounts, but the company's not really doing cross-sell and upsell really well to drive profitable growth. So that's why this one's surfacing as a growth play here. So similar to, as I said, around developing qualified pipeline, we ask questions around, what are the best practices? How is it being enabled? So again, I'll leave this in the interest of time for your reading pleasure as you get access to the materials, but similar format. But I do want to share another use case from another company. So creative solution software companies, so think creative design, creative activation, creative targeting, creative orchestration. You probably know of the company. You probably use the company's products. We call this a tried and true example where, most companies have a similar challenge where what they wanted to do was recognize and prioritize new buying opportunities within their existing accounts. And so what was happening with this particular client was they wanted to improve sales productivity and profitability in terms of marketing and sales productivity and profitability. But what was happening was the marketing team was just inundated with requests. I have this account kind of step in my stage of my funnel that I need to have this deck for times, 300-400. So it was constantly a constant flow of requests around, like, I need this slide, I need this deck, I need this. And by the way, I need it all personalized for this account based on their disposition, based on what I have in the funnel, based on what we know about them. Just not scalable, right? And so, what that meant for the marketing team was 40 plus slides and constant personalization, which means that marketing was being inefficient, not productive in driving, new market activation and development strategies. Sales was, relying on marketing to kind of, scale out that content and position it in front of their customer, which means that they're not selling, right? They're not prospecting. They're focused on, how to position in the content I get, when I'm ready for that meeting. And so what they did is they pulled together a data strategy. And again, this was using machine learning. And what they were trying to do was distinguish decision makers, influencers, and buyers to help sellers prioritize that outreach. And what they did was they used ChatGPT alongside some other things to really do the right side of this, right? Which was understand, like, where do they have good account penetration? Where do they have share of wallet conversion happening? Where they have lifetime value opportunity to go get? And what they did was they built this machine learning model to identify the spend patterns relative to competitive products and services that are being offered out there. And they use that as a way to inform the personalized dynamic content to improve churn rates and customer characteristics and ultimately product lifetime value, and scale out their content engine to deliver out those auto-created decks and selling materials to the sales organization. So this is a common challenge that we hear from clients all the time, which is just like, we can't scale our content fast enough. We can't equip our sales teams. This marketing team in particular took a very data-led strategy to both align the sales team around both the data strategy and also the delivery of that data strategy to help improve their productivity very much upfront in the strategy development. But then the teams came together to understand, like, how do they build this together to make it more valuable to sales? And so you're all probably working on this. You might be leveraging something like a HighSpot or Seismic or something along those lines. But tool aside, start with the strategy, start with the data, start with the alignment with the sales team. And if you fast forward now to where this client is, they're very much in a improved to benchmark prospecting time and productivity rate performance perspective. So they're putting some great wins on the board as an output of how they're leveraging machine learning and generative AI to, bring the data strategy to life into, personalized delivered content. So a couple things to leave you with in terms of integrating AI into your commercial model. Some of these are not going to be, radically new to you, but we found that there's some commonality to them. So do think about your use cases, point your tools to the use cases, point your business case to the use cases. Make sure you have project leadership that can drive this, both with senior leadership in terms of, like, what is the strategy, what is the use cases, what are we expecting to achieve, but also more specifically can drive the alignment. What we are seeing as a big pain point for organization is that AI is persistent. It lives in multiple teams, but there is no kind of charter. There is no operating model, which means that there is no project leadership. So do think about that, kind of readying the organization top to bottom. Make sure your data is in a place where you have good data architecture and integrity of the right hygiene. So, as you do this and you're developing your use cases, you're doing that with integrity in mind. And then you got to look at your options, right? Like, then think about your tools, then think about your solutions, things along those lines that you can kind of pilot, iterate on, things along those lines in your rollout plan. And then the last part around the rollout and the operationalization and measuring your impact, go back to your charter, your operating model, your project leadership. If you don't bring your executives along for how you are showing discrete wins with AI, they will not trust it. They will not believe in it. They will not invest in it in the next, call it 12 to 18 months. So they may try it now, but they may not believe in it for the future. So do think about these things in terms of your plan to get started. And if you need our help, let us know. We're in this every day, all day long with organizations like yourselves. In particular, myself, I'm very actively involved in this space. But I want to thank you for the time today. Enjoy the rest of the event. I'm looking to enjoy the other topics as well. And as I mentioned, reach out with questions. We're here to help. Have a great day. Bye.